Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. This is Paige Hancock, Marketing Manager at Spok, and I'll be moderating today's webinar. Today, we'll be talking about 6 ways to bolster the benefits of your EHR by improving communications at your hospital. Dr. Andrew Mellon, Chief Medical Officer at Spok, will share how pairing your EHR with communication tools can help foster clinical collaboration. Before we get started, I would like to go over just a few housekeeping items. Everyone will be muted during today's webinar, but we do welcome your participation. Please submit your questions via the questions box, which is in your GoToWebinar toolbar, and then Dr. Mellon will answer as many questions as time allows after the presentation. A recording of this webinar and the presentation slides will be sent to all registrants tomorrow, and we encourage you to feel free and share these with others at your organization as well. And lastly, at the end of the webinar, you'll have the opportunity to complete an evaluation. We would love it if you could take a couple of minutes to complete this short survey. Your feedback helps our efforts to provide you with relevant and informative presentations. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Mellon, who'll begin our presentation.
Thanks. It's great to be here, and this is a fun presentation for me. So we'll be covering a number of topics over the next half hour to 45 minutes. Going through a little bit of just the healthcare evolution timeline, talk about the EHRs and the differences between an EHR and a communication platform, and then walk through a number of use cases to show how these two tools together make for a great model to improve patient outcomes. So I just want to go back a little bit in time. These are fun for me. I like sort of vintage technology. I recently bought an Apple IIc for myself, and if anyone remembers what that is. And, I think about my career and how it's changed over my lifetime. And two stories that come to mind. One is my dad's a physician, and I have this very vivid memory of growing up with him with communications. And he carried a pager around. It was a voice pager. And I remember driving around, and he would get paged. We'd be in our family car. I'd be with my 2 siblings fighting the back seat, and he got paged, and we would have to drive around and find a gas station where they had a payphone, so we could pull over and put quarters in, which he had a stack of quarters in the car to answer his call. World's changed a lot, and today he does secure messaging. He still sees patients, and he does secure texting with me on my phone. I think about another part of my story, even more recent, and how much things have changed. So I had my first job after, sort of real job after residency. I went to become a hospitalist at a health system here in the Twin Cities, and this was, I think, 1999 at this point. And when I got there, I remember this very distinctly. I was doing orientation. One of the other hospitalists was showing me around, and he said, when you want results, they're always printed out and they're put in the back of the chart. And I said, well, can't I look them up on the computer? He said, why would you want to do that? I said, well, because it's faster. He's like, maybe I'll see if I can figure out something. So I did get a password into the green screen terminals that we had, so I could look up my lab results. And the world is, so today the world's really different in not a very long time, and it's continuing to change, and it's continuing to have, all of these new technologies are in many ways additive, but also in other ways confusing, and create more channels and more opportunities for things to go well, but also things to go wrong. What I want to talk about today is how 2 of these core technologies that have really advanced over the past decade, the EHR and the health and communication platform, have both found their own paths of value, but more importantly, how they come together to help our health systems. So we obviously know a lot about EHR adoption. I've had the privilege of designing EHR systems. I had the privilege of implementing Davies award-winning EHR at 8 hospitals and 60 clinics. I've used an EHR, and despite what everyone says, and despite what all the challenges are, I truly believe it's made for safer and better patient care. They're certainly not perfect, but the way I talk about it is we're just at the beginning. We've automated a lot of processes. We've made information retrieval faster. But we still have a long way to go and a tremendous opportunity to use this technology to improve patient care. But what we see with EHRs today is they fall into this these buckets of activities for health systems. And this is from an AMIA presentation, and I liked how they put this together. They're a repository, so we view them as a repository of information. They collect everything that's coming together. They're a messenger, so things like office communications that maybe were an email or paper before, things like refills for medications, charts that need to be signed. Things that aren't urgent, but just, instead of moving that pile of charts with sticky notes, you're moving inbox messages for people to look at them. It's also an orchestrator, so it orchestrates some fairly complex processes. If you think about all the steps in a medication administration, there's a lot that happens between the moment an order leaves the doctor's head and goes into the computer to the moment that medication is safely administered to the patient. EHRs automate all that, and they monitor information. So they do have information to monitor populations of patients, to start to see things around population health, or even simple things like flu shot reminders. All of these are tremendously valuable, but there are things that are missing. There are some challenges still. If you think of EHR as your sole system, EHRs are not the beginning and the end. They're a part of it. Let's tell some of the things I think about with EHRs and some of the gaps. Number one is, they're really designed to be retrieval systems. They're designed to be systems where I need to go in and look through a complex set of information and try to discern what's important. They're not systems that push stuff to me when I need to deal with it. They're more a pull. One of the other things I think about is this ability to coordinate mass notifications. There's a lot of activity that happens over the course of a hospital where you have to rally a group of people all at once. And sometimes we think about, we'll stick a message of the day up on the EHR login screen, but that's not a mass notification. Mass notifications are things when something urgent is happening, whether it's to a patient, whether it's a situation, whether it's just a notification of an important system downtime, where you need to get this information to a lot of people quickly. And that's just not the role of the EHR, but it's an important activity in health systems. So if you look at the world of communications, there has been this interesting evolution over the past decade or two, where you've gone from sort of this concept where lots of best-of-breed vendors, people that do alarm integration, people that do secure texting, people that have on-call schedules, people that do paging. Just like if you think back 2 decades ago or a decade ago in the EHR world, where you have best-of-breed vendors for the EHR and best-of-breed vendors, for inpatient and nursing, a best-of-breed vendor for your EHR, a best-of-breed vendor for the pharmacy. And while they worked, you quickly ran into roadblocks and realized that suite vendors, the Cerners and the Epics, Meditechs of the world, are the ones that really can provide the value. And we're seeing the same thing in the communication environment, where you're evolving from a bunch of puzzle pieces to a unified platform that brings all these different aspects of communication together. So I want to focus on 6 areas of that, how that broad platform that brings all these pieces together can help your EHR and help your health system by complementing your EHR. So we'll walk through all these scenarios and we'll go through them one by one. So let's talk about the first one. The EHR alone supports some members of the care team. There are many people that provide care in your health system, and especially if you use care in a very broad sense of all the activities that have to happen for the patient, that don't spend their day in the EHR like a nurse might or a doctor might. You have transport, you have environmental services, you have some of the registration people, you have support, you have the valets or patient navigators. There are all these people throughout the hospital that are helping provide an incredible experience for that patient. But they don't live in the EHR. And so, but the EHRs are, and so how do you help support them? Many of them probably don't even have a login to the EHR. But you need to communicate with them, and you need to communicate events from the EHR to them. So with a communication platform, it's not just the people living in the EHR, but it's every single person in the health system that you need to communicate with is represented in this platform. Whether they are clinical, whether they're the physician or nurse, whether they're transport, whether they're the environmental services, whoever it is, if they need to have communications, they're represented and can be addressed and messaged through this platform. Talk about the second one, limited contact information. You know, what's interesting, if you look in the EHR, of course, if you were looking, when I was seeing patients, you could look me up, you could see my group's phone number as a hospitalist, so that was actually kind of irrelevant. And that was all you could really see. What you really cared about was, as a hospitalist, was I on call? You know, so if I saw the patient yesterday, am I on call today? And what's my pager number? You know, if I'm a consultant, if I was a cardiologist, if I was looking for one of my colleagues, I'd want to know that same information. But I also worked a lot of nights and weekends when, you know, I had to call not their pager, but their office. So I want to know their office paging system. Or that I might want to see information that only I could see as another doctor that says doctors can call, you know, this person, Dr. Smith, the cardiologist, cell phone directly. Everyone else go through their answering service. And only make that cell phone visible to other doctors. All that stuff is critical for understanding how to communicate with people in the health system. That's just not in the EHR. And in your communication platform, you do have the ability to say all their contact information, differentially show contact information depending on privileges, and make sure it's always available. It's not locked in a paper folder. It's not locked down by the hospital operators, but it's available on any computer or any place you have a web browser to look that information up. So it's a big difference. And again, it helps complement what's in the EHR. Look at another use case. You know, one of the most frustrating things for me as a hospitalist was figuring out who the heck I'm supposed to call. So again, I worked weekends. I came in on Saturday. I picked up 15 or so patients. I knew nothing about them. And, you know, not only did my group change as a hospitalist, but probably half or more of the consultants changed. So I come into my patient and I would see that, you know, they were seen by the surgery service. I knew which service they were on, but I had no idea if that person who saw them yesterday was actually going to see them today. So how do I track them down? You know, so we didn't have a communication platform where I work, so I did what was easiest, which was I basically asked the nurse and make it their problem. So that's not efficient, and it was frustrating for me because, you know, I don't, that's just a non-value add step. What I wanted to do was just be able to say, oh, for this group, this person's on call, here's their pager number, and page them. So the EHR doesn't have that information, but if you have a unified communication platform, all of that information is available. You can go into the platform, you can see who's on call, you know, it can unify this across multiple different groups, but even across multiple different on-call schedules and types of systems, and also show things like status and availability. So if I had this where I worked, and I was in that situation, what I do, I click the button to get to the on-call schedule, then I would see who it is. I click a button to send a message, type it in, and go and be off to my next task. And that would have been far more efficient. So again, it complements the EHR by bringing that information and making it available in ways that just isn't represented. Another thing that we're seeing with the EHRs is, you know, all of them started on the desktop. They all have very thick and complex user experiences for complex problems. They've expanded a little bit to mobile devices, whether it's iPhones, iPads, Android devices, for limited capabilities. But we still see limited adoption of that. And then there's other groups that still haven't accepted that. There are groups that it doesn't make sense to buy an iPhone or an expensive device for them. There are people that still are very happy with their pager and don't want to change. They find it's a nice way to turn on and off their communications. They find it's extremely reliable. They find it's a simple single-purpose device and they can keep their two worlds separate. And that's fine. But in EHR, again, those options are limited. With a communication platform, you are able to support this diversity of devices. That's really important to the end users and to your organization as you look at reliability, you look at cost, you look at durability. So for your transport people, they have pagers. For maybe a nurse in the ED, maybe they carry a phone because they're always on that phone talking to people. Maybe your nurse on the floor has a smartphone. And everywhere in between. With a communication platform, you're assured of being able to send and receive messages from every single type of device and routing it to any other type of device. There's no island of communication that's limited by the choices you make for other reasons, but instead a platform that can ensure all these separate technologies are brought together into one way. Let's look at the next concept of middleware. So, in the world of the EHRs, we see more and more connectivity. They're not standalone devices or standalone technologies, but they're bringing in information from other systems. Some of that's through HL7. Some of the times they have to buy specialized middleware that do things like bring in vital signs from other equipment. But those EHRs are not, but there's two things that you want to do with these devices out there. For some of them, you're happy and content with just bringing that information into the EHR to make charting easier. For some of these other devices, let's say a telemetry system, what you really care about is alarms. So when an alarm happens from a telemetry device, it's not so much you want it to go into the EHR, but you need to communicate that. And for sometimes you want to do both. You want to get both into EHR and communicate events from devices. But the EHRs, even when they do offer middleware, often aren't focused as much on the communication aspect. And as some of the other the non-communication focused middleware vendors, they're really focused on sort of moving information for charting efficiency and not about communicating. With an integrated middleware as part of your communication platform, you can really optimize this ability to say when a signal happens throughout your organization, when an event happens that we need to tell someone about, we can get that signal, that event to that right person. And it's not just getting it there, it's getting it there in a way that I call has accountability. It's making sure it's seen, and if it's not seen or acted on by that first person it goes to, it's escalating it. These are not events saying, hey, I want to go to lunch, but these are things saying, person is in pain. It could be things from non-patient events or non-patient care systems, like the refrigerator temperature for your pharmacy is dangerously high, and you need to go do something about this before your drugs spoil. So connecting all of these kinds of devices that you're not necessarily focused on getting into the EHR, but getting someone to act on as soon as there is insight that something is awry or something needs to be done, is the value of this. And by having it as part of the communication platform, you have a singular way to make sure that all those communication preferences, all of that routing information is managed in a unified manner. And so the last thing is emergency notifications. I touched on this earlier, but there are all kinds of events that happen where you need to rally a lot of people quickly. They could be things like a code STEMI, where someone shows up in the emergency room at 10 at night, they're having a chest pain, and you do the EKG, and they're having a heart attack. And you need to get the cath lab team in there as fast as possible. And it's truly a situation where minutes matter. I heard of another organization where, on a different end of the spectrum, where they said they had a water main break, and they had to quickly tell all 3,000 people to notify their patients, to let them know not to park in this parking ramp. It could be shooter on campus. It could be any kind of situation where you need to notify a lot of people. And some of these communications are, again, you have to have accountability. So if you notify you have a code STEMI, and the cardiologist happens to have his pager or his cell phone turned off for whatever reason, and doesn't notice it, doesn't do any good if everyone else has showed up in the cath lab with no cardiologist. So there are situations with some of these mass notifications where you need to make sure not only does it get there, but you need to make sure you're tracking that they've seen it and they know about it or coming in. And other times, let's say it's a tornado, like in this example, take cover, you just want that out there as fast as possible to all the right people. So that whole spectrum of mass notifications is an important part of your communication platform. And by having it integrated and part of that platform, you don't have to think about things like building separate call schedules, that On call for cardiology is put that exact same cardiology schedule that maybe you use for all the nurses on the floor or other people to contact. You don't have to worry about communication preferences. All that work that's already been set up in the platform is automatically used as you try to contact that cardiologist. So those are the 6 areas that, that I wanted to focus on that are really different, are things that complement and fill gaps and voids that are not addressed through your EHR. There are also things that I think about that are not bits and parts where, if you solve maybe one part of that puzzle, you take care of these problems well. But it's really, all of those areas are ones that I think about where you need that whole puzzle, all those pieces together to make a difference. Now, I want to show a little bit more in some real-world clinical examples how all these pieces are manifest together. So take those 6 areas and put together a real-world clinical scenario, things that I would have experienced when I saw patients. It just helps solidify these workflows and maybe show you some real-world proof points of what some of our other customers are doing to help you sort of build a mental model of this. So just a basic patient care scenario that I'll walk through. So someone shows up, they have severe pneumonia. Common thing that happens, something I would have done as a hospitalist if they had severe pneumonia, I would have called the cardiologist or the pulmonologist. So I would have gone into Epic, the EHR used, and in my admitting orders, I would have said consult pulmonary. And then what would have happened? That order, if I was urgent, I would have walked over to the nurse or the health unit coordinator and said, hey, I need pulmonary to talk to me. I want to talk to them right now, or I want them to come really soon. Can you call them? Because who knows how long that order would have sat there waiting for them to look at it. Or I would have just, if it wasn't urgent, I'd let it wait, and I know I'd be confident to get to it sometime over the next few hours. But let's change that paradigm. What are some of our customers doing? Well, as soon as that order is placed, they use our platform, and our platform will take that order message and say, oh, pulmonary consult to, like Midwest Pulmonology. We have Midwest Pulmonology schedule. It's 8 o'clock at night. Who's on call? It's Dr. Jones. So we will send a message right away, immediately after that order is placed, to Dr. Jones containing information about whatever was captured in that order message. We can communicate it securely to that pulmonologist so they can see it, they act on it. We've taken out the middlemen. Another story around this, I was at one of our customer sites talking about this a little bit. He was a OBGYN, and he said, gosh, one of the most frustrating things for me is, actually this happened while we were sitting here, and when he was talking about it, he went into his EHR. It was probably 4:30 in the day. He goes to his in-basket. Oh man, a consult. I've been sitting here for like 2 hours, with nothing to do. This consult was placed 3 hours ago, and no one told me about it. Now it sucks because I'm going to get home later. I would have been done, 30 minutes from now. So this eliminates that. So we see a lot of value in our organizations by getting these consult orders out immediately with the patient information, takes out the middle person, tied to the on-call schedule, and goes right to the provider so they can act on it. All right, so a little further down this path, patient's in the room, she's short of breath. And she hits her nurse call button. So in this platform, we know who's assigned to that patient. We know what kind of device that nurse is carrying. We know the capabilities of it. And we'll send her a message. The nurse sees the nurse call. She knows the patient who it came from, knows the room that they're in. You can bring a little contextual information associated with that. And the nurse will accept it. Say, yep, got it. Because if she doesn't, she either ignores it or clicks decline because she's really busy. They'll get escalated to someone else. And more importantly, with many of these devices, they have pillow speakers. So she can push the callback button and talk to the patient directly in the room, say, I got it, let me get your medicine. I'll be there in a minute. All right, next scenario. So a little further down the path, patient's still short of breath. The nurse is in there seeing her. She puts in the vital signs. And lo and behold, the organization has done some great, this organization, let's say, has done some great work around preventing sepsis, identifying patients early. They've built a clinical decision support tool in their EHR. So as soon as information is gathered in the EHR, in this case through some vital signs, that patient is deteriorating or is at risk for deteriorating, a clinical decisions alert pops up on the screen. So it says, warning, Muse score of 6. Patient should be evaluated. So what could happen? What should happen? Well, in the ideal world, you want the rapid response team, a set of individuals who have been designated to address these situations, who can bring in a new set of eyes to see that patient as soon as possible. So the way a communication platform fits in is, as soon as that alert fires and the nurse acknowledges it, the communication platform will see an event in the EHR, take that event, and immediately send it to the members of the rapid response team. So instead of what typically happens is the nurse sees it, maybe she gets distracted, she, another patient pages her that they're having severe chest pain and runs over there. Maybe she has to, take a mental, she's like, oh my gosh, but let me walk out, disrupt my mental flow, go tell the health unit coordinator to page the rapid response team. All this happens automatically. It hardwires that process. It lowers time. In fact, we have an organization we worked with that put in this whole process, including the communication, and they have some really early data that we'll be publishing. They'll be publishing pretty soon that showed a 20% reduction in mortality rate for patients with higher levels of Muse score. So really exciting about how they, not only put in the decision support alert, but have great stories around improving the time to response when something happens. All right, fortunately, this patient's getting better, but the intern comes in and sees the patient. They're a little bit worried and says, let's get an x-ray. Let's see what's going on. So she comes in, they put an order in the EHR, the portable chest x-ray tech comes, takes the image, bring it back, and the radiologist reads it. They say, oh, wow, this patient has acute pneumothorax. There's air around the lung. If you're not a radiologist, on that image on the bottom left, all that black spots sort of around the left side of the lung shouldn't be there. That's air outside of the lung. That's a medical emergency, or it certainly can be. So what happens? Well, in the sort of usual world, the radiologist says, okay, I got to find this person. Who is it? How do I find their number? How do I track them down? Let me make sure I find them. It consumes a lot of their time. It's really frustrating. You hear stories that this takes 10 to 20% of their time anecdotally. But with the communication platform, we can see this event. The radiologists can designate in their report, this is a level 1 critical alert, some keyword. The system will see that message as it comes out, as that report comes out, and immediately escalate it, get it to that person who ordered it. So, and again, they're with a series of escalations, so if it's not seen, this case is a medical emergency and should be addressed really quickly. If it's something that it's not seen very quickly, it can be escalated on to the next person to help address the problem. So thanks to the good work of this health system, the patient's getting better, feeling great, ready to go home. So the nurse wants to send a message to the provider. It's amazing to me that I still go to health systems today in 2017, because I haven't done this yet in 2018. But I've been to a number of health systems last year when I say, how does a nurse get in touch with the doctor? They say, well, they call the hospital operator and they page them. Then I go to the hospital operator and I say, gee, well, what do you do? Well, I open up a book, I find their phone number, and then I dial that pager number, and then I type in a callback number. I will tell you, first of all, I think all of us, hopefully your organizations aren't doing that, but I think all of us can see how that is not efficient. I will tell you on the receiving end of pages, I hated getting phone number pages. They are the worst, because I don't know if it means someone's coding or about to code, or I don't know if that means someone, family will be here tomorrow and wants to know if you can come by at 11. Two extraordinarily different urgencies, and but I have no idea what that means from a phone number. And so, again, surprising to me that still happens, but it happens a lot. what well-run organizations do is they have a way for nurses to directly just say, oh, it's Dr. Mellon. Let's find them in the unified platform, just on a web page, find their name, click a button, type me in a message, and you can even build little templates so there's structure to those messages. You make sure they come out in a very standardized way, helps with patient safety, and helps for me as a receiver to make sure I get the nurse's name, I get maybe the room number, I get patient name, and I get a callback number, and they send it. So again, for the nurse, what's easier? Picking up a phone, doing all this. What's a better solution for the organization? Having the provider get a phone call or a pager with a phone number, that's really painful. Or having a rich message where as a recipient, I immediately know how I need to act on it. Obviously, this is better. And this is part of that unified platform where no matter what device someone has, no matter what answering service they have, no matter what pager or secure messaging app they use, one way to message everybody. And then wrapping things up for this patient, they're great to go. One thing one of our organizations are doing, I love this, they're really focused on patient service and patient experience. They also are doing some construction where they were realizing it was taking a while from the time the patient kind of walked outside to say, I'm ready to go, and by the time the valet actually brought their car. So what they're doing now is as soon as an event is placed in the EHR, an ADT event, that the patient's leaving, the communication platform sees that event, interprets it, and sends it a simple message to the valet. And the valet says, oh, this patient's being discharged, and I'm going to go pull their car. So when the patient is brought downstairs and brought to the valet service, their car is there waiting for them. It's a much better experience for the patient. And again, simple thing, but really creative. And I think all of these things I talked about, whether it's valet, whether it's using clinical decision for sepsis, any of these kinds of events for orders, like a consult, these are all generalizable. These are all patterns that our customers use in a bunch of different ways and to solve problems that they have in their organization. So to wrap things up, then we'll have time for a few questions. The EHR is the heart and soul of most health systems right now. It is, the way health systems run. They are incredibly important and they're not going anywhere. But they still leave a gap of things that just aren't in their core competencies, a gap around communicating, connecting with care teams in different ways than you do through a static note that shows up in the EHR, connecting all of these devices that are creating signals and events, whether they are generated out of the EHR or generated out of a telemetry device, an HVAC device, any other kind of patient monitor, and bringing together some of that data so it comes to that provider, caregiver, care team member, staff member of the health system, so they can act on it quickly as soon as it happens. So thank you. This is a fun topic for me, and I think the thing that I love the most about this is all of these things I talked about are examples, virtually all of them are examples where our customers have looked at these tools and concepts and thought about how they create this. I'm hearing more about a real-time healthcare system and using this platform to bring this together, helping the organization act faster on events, helping them act faster on patient care, communications, and helping them act faster so those patients have better outcomes and get home quicker. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Mellon, so much for that insightful presentation. We will take some time now to answer your audience questions. It looks like there are a couple that have been submitted already, but just a reminder that if you do have a question, please submit it in your questions box in that GoToWebinar toolbar, and then we will answer as many as time allows. So our first question is, which EHRs does Spok integrate with? Sure.
So for the examples I shared today, we have a lot of Epic sites, as you imagine, with their market presence. Same with Cerner. We also have Meditech. We really integrate with industry standards, HL7 and other ways. So there are not. We do some unique things depending on the EHR, but for the most part, we integrate with any EHR Same thing with interoperability for devices. We support all of the common nurse call systems, Well and Borg and others. We support many of the telemetry monitors, and many of those, most of those use industry standard protocols, which we support. Some of them have unique characteristics, which we also work with.
Excellent, thank you. Another attendee has asked if you have any tips or advice to help drive end user adoption for secure texting.
Yeah, great question. And I think there's a couple things I think about with driving end user adoption of secure texting. I think the first thing is not to make it a telecommunication. This is a not to do. Don't make it a telecommunications project. This secured messaging is about patient care, and it should be done as a joint project between telecom or IT, depending on where that lives, and the clinical team. This needs to be made a clinical priority. It needs to be driven for improving patient care. I think the second thing is, so despite what anyone says in any health system, I guarantee you there are things that you don't want happening through iMessage and SMS and other things. And the way you change that is you make it better to do secure messaging through a secure platform. And the way you do that is really a couple things. One is you make it so all of the directory information is in there already. So you're not giving the users, hey, here's this cool secure messaging application, but you have to make your own network and re-enter all the phone numbers or whatever it was that you did. So you have all the pre-populated with all the communication information already. The second thing is you include on-call schedules. So as a provider, a lot of times I don't know who I want to communicate with, but I know which group I want to communicate with. So you allow communication via on-call schedules. And I think the third thing is you have added value capabilities that go beyond what you get with sort of the consumer grade applications like status and being able to communicate you're not available. Things like making sure you're having pictures. So I even know while consumer app does that, you often don't want that picture of this really awful wound to be on that cell phone's photo roll and get loaded to iCloud and everywhere else, Google Photos. So having a way to do photos securely. I think the third thing is, don't just throw it over the fence and expect people to use it, but looking at this as a tool to improve specific workflows. So if we can find workflows that this directly improves, such as maybe an admission process between the ED and the hospital service, maybe it's communication between the ICU multidisciplinary care team. If you can find very specific workflows to help drive, get them over that hump of change to see the value, you can start getting organic growth. But if you just throw sort of a generic healthcare secure messaging app over the wall and say, use this, I pretty much guarantee it's not going to be successful.
Just to follow up, we had someone ask, can you repeat your point about sharing photos securely?
Oh, sure. So funny story, I was with a provider at a health system once, and he said he was a wound specialist. And he said, my family really hates that on our Apple TV at home, all these really gross pictures of patients' wounds are scrolling across the screensaver. So think about what happened. They didn't have a secure messaging app, and he's taking pictures through iPhoto. They get loaded to iCloud, and they're showing up on his family's TV. Now, even if you couldn't identify who those patients are, you can certainly imagine the privacy officer at that organization would be having a cow if they knew about this. So with the secure messaging app, they have sort of essentially a self-contained photo capability. So while you're in the app, you take a picture. It gets part of that messaging communication process, but it never leaves the app. It's stored in the servers for your secure messaging solution. It's not stored in iPhoto. It never leaves that app. So that's what most organizations want. They're sending pictures is extremely valuable. There's a lot that can be communicated. You just don't want it to escape into any service that's not blessed by the health system.
Excellent. And another clarifying question on that, specific to Spok Mobile, the photos shared within Spok Mobile, like you said, do not get.
They don't escape. Yeah.
Great, thank
you. We can take pictures that are already on the device and attach it, but most people want it to be pictures you take within the app.
Perfect. It looks like we have time for one more question. How do you see hospitals balancing the need for one sort of source of truth with all the different systems?
Yeah, so one of the things that in almost any health system I worked with is if when I was implementing Epic, it just totally struck me that most health systems are these series of tiny little departments that have organically grown up over the years and have great systems in place to solve their unique problems, often without thoughts of the impact on other places. Now, well-run health systems will systematically try to address that, but it's really hard and it's a lot of work. So you do end up having a lot of sources of truth. So for different things, so for your directory, that may be populated through your HR system, that may be populated through your provider system, or even other places. And so a communications platform can pull in different sources of, for example, user information or employee information from multiple places and bring it into one common platform. The other part about that is some of those other systems may not have all of the information you need in a communication platform. So you may know who the employee is, you may know what department there is, but you may not have their communication preferences, which has to be added into the platform. So another example is on-call schedule. So, some organizations that use Spok, for example, will have some groups that are very content to use Spok's on-call schedule. It works well. It helps you communicate on call, lets offices build and maintain their own schedules, and it works great, for straightforward use cases. Some groups, though, want really sophisticated on-call schedules. So we have a partner, QGenda, where they have a great solution that does a lot of sort of intelligence to automatically build schedules based on preferences and very sophisticated reporting and figuring out, for when you're using those schedules for payment and many other things. So beyond the capabilities of what Spok offers, and that's fine. But through our integration, we can take the information that's created in QGenda, bring it into the Spok platform. So when the people need to communicate, there's just one way they look at this. They don't think, oh, is this person in QGenda or are they in Spok? They're just looking in Spok. It doesn't matter if it was created and managed in Spok or QGenda. They know to communicate, they just go to Spok. We will always have the most up-to-date information. Doesn't matter the source. So the way I look at this question is, Spok, there will always be multiple sources of information, but there should be one source of truth that everyone knows and goes to for communication.
Excellent, thank you. We are at the end of time today, so we will go ahead and conclude there. If we were unable to get to your question today, we will be sure to follow up with you offline. And if you would like to chat with a Spok representative on the topics that we discussed today, you can do so using the link in your chat box. You can also continue the conversation with fellow attendees by using the hashtag SpokWebinar on Twitter. Follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook to get all of the latest news from Spok, as well as industry news and trends. And thank you all again for joining us. We hope that you enjoyed this webinar and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.